The first sign came on a Tuesday morning when every satellite in Earth's orbit went silent for exactly 3 minutes and 17 seconds. Admiral Lee Jinwoo was drinking his morning coffee in the United Defense Council headquarters when the emergency alarms began screaming throughout the building. He set down his cup and rushed to the command center where dozens of officers were staring at their screens in confusion. "Sir, we have a problem," called out Lieutenant Park Minji from her station. She was the youngest officer in the room, but also the smartest when it came to alien technology research. All our deep space monitoring equipment just detected something impossible. Lee walked over to her console and looked at the readings. The numbers made no sense. Something massive had appeared at the edge of their solar system without any warning. No engine signatures, no heat trails, nothing that should have been possible according to human understanding of physics. "How big are we talking?" Lee asked, though he already feared the answer. "The object is roughly the size of Earth's moon, sir. It just appeared there like it had always been there. No movement detected, but it's definitely artificial." Before Lee could respond, every screen in the command center flickered and went black. Then a voice began speaking in perfect English, though it carried strange harmonics that made everyone in the room feel uncomfortable. "Primitive inhabitants of the third planet, I am War Prime Thulnox the Unbreakable, champion of the Vorthak Empire and conqueror of 847 worlds. Your species has been selected for incorporation into our dominion." The voice paused, and an image appeared on the screens. The creature that looked back at them was unlike anything humans had ever imagined. Thulnox stood nearly 10 feet tall, covered in biomechanical armor that seemed to pulse with its own life. His face was partially hidden behind a helmet, but they could see enough to know this was no friendly visitor. "You will surrender all military assets immediately. Your governments will dissolve and transfer authority to Vorthak administrators. Your population will be relocated to designated work zones where you will serve the Empire until your usefulness ends." Dr. Song Airy, the head of xenobiology research, was taking notes as fast as she could. She had spent years wondering if humanity would ever encounter alien life. Now that it was happening, she wished they had found someone more interested in peaceful contact. "Resistance will result in the complete elimination of your species," Thulnox continued. "Do not mistake this for negotiation. This is notification of what will occur. You have 7 of your solar cycles to comply." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Lee looked around at his officers and saw the same mix of fear and determination in their eyes that he felt in his own chest. "Get me President Kim on the secure line," he ordered, "and patch me through to every military commander on Earth and the colonies." While the communications officers worked to establish connections, Captain Kim Dong-ho was already dealing with the crisis from his position on Mars Colony Defense Station. He had been monitoring Earth communications when the alien message came through, and now he was watching something that made his blood run cold. Through the station's most powerful telescopes, he could see smaller ships detaching from the massive alien vessel. They moved with a grace that human ships could never match, sliding through space like they were swimming through water, rather than fighting against physics. "Commander Yoon," he called to his second-in-command. "Hyon Yoon. I'm picking up alien communications. They're not even trying to encrypt their transmissions." Hyon hurried over to his station and put on a headset. After a few moments of listening, her face went pale. "Sir, they're talking about this like it's a training exercise. The War Prime isn't even sending his regular forces. These are new recruits getting practice on what they call primitive targets." Kim felt anger building in his chest. Humans were nothing more than target practice to these creatures. He began recording everything he could intercept, knowing that any intelligence about the aliens could be crucial in the days ahead. Back on Earth, the emergency meeting of world leaders was not going well. President Kim Min-ho was trying to maintain order as representatives from every nation argued about what to do. Some wanted to surrender immediately, hoping to save as many lives as possible. Others demanded that humanity fight regardless of the odds. "We don't even know if we can hurt them," argued the representative from the European Union. "Their technology is clearly beyond ours by centuries, maybe millennia." "So we just give up?" shot back General Park Won-sik from the Asian Defense Coalition. Hand over our children to become slaves without even trying to fight? Admiral Lee listened to the arguments while reviewing the technical data his teams had gathered. The alien ship showed no obvious weapons, but something that size didn't need conventional weapons. It could probably destroy cities just by dropping pieces of itself from orbit. Dr. Park Minji approached him with a tablet full of analysis. Admiral, I've been studying their transmission. The alien language has some interesting patterns. They seem to think in very rigid hierarchical terms. Everything they said was formal, structured, like they were following a script. What does that tell us about how they fight? Lee asked. Maybe they're not as flexible as they think they are. If they always follow the same patterns, always do things the same way, that could be a weakness. Lee nodded thoughtfully. It wasn't much, but it was something. Any advantage, no matter how small, could make the difference between extinction and survival. The meeting continued for hours, but eventually the decision was made. Humanity would not surrender. They would fight, even if the odds seemed impossible. The message was transmitted to the alien ship using every available communication method. War Prime Thulnox. This is Admiral Lee Jinwoo speaking for the people of Earth. We reject your ultimatum. Humanity will not surrender our freedom or our children. If you want this world, you will have to take it. The response came within minutes. This time Thulnox's voice carried what sounded almost like amusement. Interesting. It has been some time since a species chose destruction over servitude. Very well, primitives. When your 7 cycles end, I will come personally to show you the price of defiance. Prepare yourselves for war. As the transmission ended, Lee looked around the command center at the officers who would be leading humanity's defense. They were scared, but they were determined. Maybe that would be enough. Maybe it would have to be. 7 days passed like a countdown to the end of the world. Every government on Earth worked desperately to prepare defenses they knew would probably fail. Military bases buzzed with activity as soldiers trained for an enemy they had never seen. Fight. Scientists worked around the clock trying to understand alien technology from the brief transmission recordings they had captured. When the deadline arrived, War Prime Thulnox kept his word. The first strike came at dawn in Seoul. Colonel Yoon Hyeon was reviewing defensive positions with her unit when the sky above the city simply tore open. There was no other way to describe it. Reality seemed to split apart like fabric, and through the gap came something that made her soldiers step backward in fear. Thulnox emerged from the portal wearing armor that looked like it was alive. The biomechanical suit moved with him like a second skin pulsing with energy that made the air around him shimmer. He stood nearly 10 feet tall, and the weapon in his hands hummed with power that made nearby electronics spark and fail. I am Thulnox the Unbreakable. His voice boomed across the city without any visible speakers. I have come to demonstrate the futility of your resistance. Haeyeon grabbed her radio and tried to call for backup, but the device was dead. All around her, soldiers were checking their weapons and finding the same problem. Nothing electronic worked within 100 meters of the alien warrior. Fall back to secondary positions, she shouted to her troops. Use the backup equipment. But there was no time. Thulnox raised his weapon and fired a single shot at a nearby apartment building. The structure didn't just collapse or explode. It simply ceased to exist, leaving behind a perfectly smooth crater where hundreds of people had been living moments before. The soldiers opened fire with conventional weapons, bullets, and rockets that should have been enough to stop any single target. The projectiles struck Thulnox's armor and simply disappeared, absorbed into the biomechanical surface without leaving a mark. Primitive kinetic weapons, Thulnox said, sounding almost bored. 847 species, and you all try the same approaches. He began walking forward, each step leaving small craters in the concrete. His weapon fired again and again, each shot erasing another building, another block, another piece of the city that had stood for centuries. Meanwhile, in New Geneva, Admiral Lee was watching the satellite feeds of Seoul's destruction with growing horror. The alien wasn't just destroying the city. He was taking his time, making sure everyone could see how easily he could erase human civilization. Sir, we're getting similar reports from Moscow and Cairo, Dr. Park Minji reported from her station. Small strike forces have appeared at major military installations. They're not trying to conquer territory, they're just demonstrating their power. Casualties? Lee asked, though he dreaded the answer. Difficult to estimate, sir. Entire city blocks are just gone. No rubble, no debris, just empty space where buildings used to be. Lee clenched his fists. This wasn't war in any sense that humans understood. It was extermination, carried out with the casual efficiency of someone stepping on ants. But then something unexpected happened in Neo-Tokyo. Private Choi Sun-woo was 19 years old and had been in the military for exactly 6 months when the aliens arrived. He was supposed to be guarding a supply depot on the outskirts of the city, a job that seemed safe and boring until a portal opened 50 meters from his position. The alien that stepped through was smaller than the War Prime, but still imposing in its biomechanical armor. It began systematically destroying the nearby buildings, working its way toward the depot where Sun-woo and 3 other soldiers were hiding. "We should run," whispered Corporal Lee Dong-soo, the oldest member of their small unit. "Where?" Sun-woo asked. "That thing can probably move faster than we can. And besides, there are civilians in the housing complex behind us." The alien was getting closer, its weapon charging for another shot that would level the depot and probably kill the soldiers hiding inside. Sun-woo looked around desperately and saw the construction materials they had been guarding: fertilizer for the farming domes, diesel fuel for the generators, and metal pipes for the water systems. His father had been a demolition expert before joining the military. Sun-woo had grown up learning about explosives, even though he had never thought the knowledge would be useful. "Help me move this stuff," he told the others. "I have an idea." Working quickly, they rigged a crude explosive device using the fertilizer and fuel. It wasn't sophisticated, but it didn't need to be. The alien was walking directly toward them, confident in its armor's ability to protect it from any primitive human weapon. Sun-woo waited until the creature was standing directly over the hidden explosive, then triggered the detonation using a simple electrical circuit from a broken radio. The explosion wasn't powerful enough to destroy the alien, but something amazing happened. For the first time since the invasion began, a human weapon actually damaged alien technology. The creature's armor flickered, and sparks flew from several joints in the biomechanical suit. The alien stopped moving and looked down at its damaged armor with what seemed like genuine surprise. Then it looked at the depot where the humans were hiding, and Sun-woo could swear he saw curiosity in its posture. Dr. Song-eri was studying the video footage from Neo-Tokyo when she made a discovery that changed everything. She had been analyzing the energy readings from various battle sites, trying to understand how the alien weapons worked. "Admiral Lee," she called excitedly from her research station. "I think I found something important." Lee hurried over to look at her data. The screens showed energy patterns from different battle sites, with one clear anomaly. "Look at this reading." "From Neo-Tokyo," she said, pointing to a series of spikes on the graph. "Right before the explosion, there's an unusual energy signature. It matches the brainwave patterns we recorded from the soldiers under extreme stress." "What does that mean?" Lee asked. "I think human emotions, especially fear and desperation, create some kind of energy field that interferes with their targeting systems. The more desperate and unpredictable we are, the harder it is for them to predict our actions." This was the first piece of good news Lee had heard since the invasion began. It wasn't much, but it suggested that humanity's greatest weakness might also be their greatest strength. Back in Seoul, War Prime Thulnox had finished his demonstration and was preparing to return to his ship. The city was in ruins, and the surviving humans were fleeing in terror. It should have been a satisfying victory, just like all the others. But something was bothering him. The reports from his strike teams included an anomaly from Neo-Tokyo. One of his warriors had actually been damaged by primitive human weapons. Not destroyed, not defeated, but hurt enough to matter. In 847 previous conquests, that had never happened before. For the first time in his long career as the ultimate warrior, Thulnox felt something he had forgotten: how to experience interest. 3 weeks after the first attacks, War Prime Thulnox made a decision that surprised his own forces. Instead of calling down the full invasion fleet to crush the remaining human resistance, he ordered them to maintain their position at the edge of the solar system, War Prime, his second-in-command, transmitted from the command ship. The humans are still fighting. Should we not proceed with standard extermination protocols? Thulnox stood in the ruins of what had once been downtown, Sol studying the wreckage around him. His biomechanical armor was analyzing energy readings from the area, searching for clues about how the humans had managed to damage one of his warriors. No, he replied after a long pause. This species requires further study. They have shown capabilities that do not match their technology level. This was not how the Vorthak Empire normally operated. For thousands of years, they had perfected a simple system. Arrive, demand surrender, crush resistance, move on to the next world. It was efficient and predictable. But these humans were different. They kept fighting even when fighting was clearly hopeless. They used tactics that made no sense according to military doctrine. And somehow, impossibly, they had managed to hurt a Vorthak warrior using primitive explosives and desperation. Thulnox activated his personal communication system and broadcast a message to every human military frequency he could detect. Attention, human commanders. I am War Prime Thulnox. Your species has demonstrated unexpected potential. I will give you the honor of facing me in single combat, one leader at a time. Prove your worth as warriors, and perhaps your deaths will have meaning. Commander Nam Jae-hyun received the message while hiding in the ruins of a subway station beneath what used to be Busan. He was leading a group of 43 survivors, mostly soldiers and civilians who had refused to evacuate when the aliens first arrived. He wants to hunt us like animals, said Sergeant Lim Soo-young, the unit's engineer and explosives expert. This isn't about conquest anymore. It's about his personal entertainment. Nam nodded grimly. Then we give him entertainment he won't expect. Soo-young, what do we have for supplies? She opened her pack and spread out their remaining equipment. Not much. Some conventional weapons, basic explosives, and a lot of scavenged materials from the city ruins. Can you make more of those improvised bombs like the one that worked in Neo-Tokyo? Maybe, she said thoughtfully. But we need to understand why it worked first. The aliens seem to have some kind of energy shield that stops most attacks. But human desperation and unpredictability creates interference with their systems. Nam gathered his team around him. All right, everyone. We're going to do something that probably seems insane. We're going to hunt the hunter. Meanwhile, Dr. Song Airy was working frantically in an underground research facility hidden beneath the mountains outside Geneva. She had been studying every piece of alien technology they had managed to recover, and the results were both fascinating and terrifying. Admiral Lee, she called when he arrived for the daily briefing. I think I understand how their society works. She pulled up holographic displays showing the data they had collected from intercepted alien communications. The Vorthak Empire is built on absolute hierarchy. Every individual knows exactly where they fit in the chain of command. Their battle tactics are based on thousands of years of successful conquest using the same methods. So they're predictable? Lee asked hopefully. In some ways, yes, but that also makes them incredibly efficient. They've conquered 847 worlds using the same basic approach because it always works. Until now, Lee said. Until now, she agreed. But here's what worries me. Thulnox is adapting. He's studying us, learning from our tactics. Each engagement with human forces is teaching him something new about warfare. This was exactly what Commander Nam was discovering firsthand. His first encounter with the War Prime had been a disaster. Nam had tried standard guerrilla tactics, setting up an ambush in a collapsed building. Thulnox had detected the trap easily and destroyed half of Nam's team with a single weapon blast. But the second encounter went differently. Nam's team had spent days studying the alien's movement patterns, learning how he chose targets and approached combat situations. When they met again, Nam didn't try to hide or set up careful ambushes. Instead, he did something completely random and desperate. He and his soldiers ran directly at Thulnox, screaming and firing wildly, throwing improvised explosives without any coordination or planning. It was the opposite of military discipline, a chaotic attack that violated every rule of tactical combat. And it worked. The aliens' targeting systems couldn't predict their movements because the humans themselves didn't know what they were going to do next. Several explosives managed to reach their target, and while they didn't seriously damage the war prime, they did something more important. They surprised him. For the first time in centuries, Thulnox found himself uncertain about the outcome of a battle. These humans fought like they had nothing to lose because they didn't. Their homeworld was already destroyed. Their civilization was already ending. All they had left was the fight itself. Interesting, Thulnox said after Nam's team had retreated into the rubble-filled streets. You fight without hope of victory. This is a concept I have not encountered before. He began pursuing Nam's group through the ruined city, not to destroy them quickly, but to study them. Each encounter taught him something new about human psychology and tactics. Captain Oh Min-seok was leading a similar cat and mouse game with another alien strike team on the other side of the world. His group had captured a small Vorthak outpost by using nothing but scavenged materials and pure human creativity. They had built fake weapons that looked dangerous but were actually just painted pipes and lights. They had created fake explosions using firecrackers and smoke machines salvaged from a destroyed entertainment center. The entire attack had been an elaborate magic trick, designed to confuse rather than destroy. It had worked perfectly. The aliens had retreated from what they thought was a major human offensive, leaving behind valuable technology and intelligence data. The key is making them think we're something we're not, Oh explained to his team after the successful raid. They expect us to be primitive and predictable, so we be unpredictable in ways they can't imagine. But the most important development was happening inside Thulnox himself. Dr. Kang Jihye, a military psychologist who had been analyzing recordings of the aliens' behavior, noticed something that gave her hope. He's changing, she reported to Admiral Lee. Look at these movement patterns from his first attacks compared to his recent engagements. He's becoming more cautious, more thoughtful. He's starting to make decisions based on curiosity, rather than just following standard Vorthak doctrine. Is that good or bad for us? Lee asked. I'm not sure yet, Kang admitted, but it means he's becoming more human-like in his thinking, and that might be something we can use. Thulnox was indeed changing, though he didn't fully understand it himself. Each battle with the humans taught him something new about concepts his people had abandoned long ago: sacrifice for others, fighting without hope of reward, the strange power that came from emotional connections between individuals. He found himself spending hours studying human cultural databases, trying to understand what motivated these creatures to keep fighting when victory was impossible. The answers he found were disturbing and fascinating. These humans actually cared about each other in ways that made them stronger rather than weaker. It was a concept that challenged everything the Vorthak Empire had built their civilization on. 2 months into what the humans were calling the Resistance War, both sides had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Thulnox was no longer the same warrior who had conquered 847 worlds using standard Vorthak tactics. The humans had forced him to adapt, to think, to question methods that had worked perfectly for centuries. Commander Nam Jae-hyun crouched in the ruins of what had once been Busan's central library, studying maps that his team had drawn on pieces of cardboard. Regular paper was too valuable to waste, and electronic devices still failed when the war prime was nearby. He's getting smarter, Nam told his assembled fighters. The ambush tactics that worked last week don't work anymore. He's learning from every encounter. Sergeant Lim Soo-young nodded grimly. But we're learning too. I figured out how to make explosives that work better against their energy shields. The key is using human emotional responses as part of the detonation system. She held up a device that looked like it had been built from spare parts in desperation. This explosive is triggered by stress hormones. The more afraid and desperate the person carrying it is, the more powerful the blast becomes. It was typical human engineering, inefficient, unpredictable, and completely impossible according to conventional physics. It also worked better than anything the Vorthak had ever encountered. Captain Oh Min-seok had taken his team's success with the fake weapons raid and developed it into an entire new form of warfare. His group specialized in psychological operations designed to confuse and frustrate alien forces. They had created fake military bases that looked impressive from the air, but were actually just painted cardboard and light displays. They had built decoy weapons that appeared to be powerful human technology, but were actually just cleverly disguised garbage. Most importantly, they had learned to use the aliens' own efficiency against them. The Vorthak always take the most direct path to their objective. O explained to a group of new recruits hiding in an abandoned shopping center. They've been doing things the same way for so long that they can't imagine any other approach, so we give them approaches they can't imagine. His latest plan involved using the city's old subway system to create a network of false tunnels that led nowhere. Alien forces would detect what appeared to be major human installations underground, but when they investigated, they would find empty rooms filled with speakers playing recordings of human voices and heat generators creating false thermal signatures. It won't hurt them directly, O admitted, but it will waste their time and make them doubt their own intelligence gathering. Confusion is a weapon too. Meanwhile, Dr. Song Airy had made a breakthrough that could change everything. Working with captured alien technology and data from the various resistance groups, she had discovered something remarkable about Vorthak society. "Admiral Lee," she said excitedly when he visited her hidden laboratory, "I've been studying their communication patterns, and I think I understand why Thulnox is behaving so strangely." She pulled up holographic displays showing brain scan patterns from various species the Vorthak had conquered. "Look at this data. Every species they've defeated shows the same basic neural patterns: fear, despair, surrender. Simple, emotional responses that the Vorthak can predict and counter." "But humans are different?" Lee asked. "Completely different. Our emotional responses are chaotic, unpredictable, and they get stronger when we're threatened rather than weaker. But here's the really important part." She highlighted a section of the data. "Thulnox's own neural patterns are changing. The more he fights us, the more human-like his thought processes become. What does that mean for us? It means he's learning to think like we do. That could make him more dangerous, but it also means he might be developing human weaknesses along with human strengths." Dr. Kang Jihye had been tracking these changes from a psychological perspective. As a specialist in trauma and combat stress, she was uniquely qualified to understand what was happening to both the human fighters and their alien opponent. "Thulnox is experiencing something his species hasn't felt in thousands of years," she reported to the resistance leadership during one of their encrypted video conferences. "Personal growth through adversity." She showed them recordings of the War Prime's recent battles, pointing out subtle changes in his behavior patterns. He's becoming more cautious, but also more creative. He's starting to make tactical decisions based on emotion rather than just following military doctrine. "Is that good or bad?" asked General Park Wansik from his hidden command bunker. "Both," Kang admitted. "It makes him less predictable, which is dangerous. But it also means he's becoming vulnerable to the same psychological tactics we use against human opponents." The proof of this came during a battle in the ruins of what had been Seoul's financial district. Private Choi Sunwoo, the young soldier who had first damaged alien armor, was now leading his own resistance cell. He had become something of a legend among human fighters, the ordinary soldier who had proved that the aliens could be hurt. Sunwoo's team had developed a specialty in impossible rescues. They would identify areas where civilians were trapped by alien patrols, then stage elaborate rescue operations that shouldn't have worked but somehow did. On this particular day, they were trying to evacuate a group of families hiding in a collapsed apartment building. Thulnox himself had detected their presence and was moving in to eliminate what he assumed was another military target. But when the War Prime arrived at the building, he found something he hadn't expected. Instead of soldiers preparing for battle, he discovered Sunwoo and his team helping elderly civilians climb through rubble, carrying children who were too young to walk, sharing their limited food supplies with strangers who had nothing left. "Why do you do this?" Thulnox asked, his voice booming across the ruins. "These individuals contribute nothing to your military capabilities. Saving them provides no tactical advantage." Sunwoo looked up at the massive alien warrior and felt the familiar fear that came with facing impossible odds. But he also felt something else. Anger at the question itself. Because they're people, he said simply. Because nobody should die, alone and afraid if we can help it. This is inefficient, Thulnox replied, but something in his tone suggested uncertainty rather than dismissal. Maybe, Sunwoo agreed. But it's right. The War Prime stood there for several minutes, watching, as humans risked their lives to save others who couldn't help them fight. It was behavior that violated every principle of Vorthak military doctrine. Resources should be allocated efficiently. The weak should be abandoned to preserve the strong. Personal attachments were tactical liabilities, but these humans fought harder when they were protecting others than when they were just trying to survive. Their emotional connections made them stronger, not weaker. For the first time in his long career, Thulnox found himself questioning not just tactics, but purpose. What was the point of conquest if it destroyed everything worth conquering? Hilo, let the civilians escape. Engineer Lim Soo-young had been working on her most ambitious project yet. Using salvaged alien technology and human creativity, she was building something that shouldn't have been possible, a weapon that could actually threaten Vorthak armor. The key is not trying to overpower their shields, she explained to her technical team in their hidden workshop. Instead, we confuse them. Human emotions create energy patterns that interfere with their targeting systems. So I'm building a device that amplifies and focuses those patterns. The weapon looked like something built from spare parts because it was. Pieces of alien technology were connected to human electronics using wire salvaged from destroyed buildings. The power source was a combination of conventional batteries and what Soo-young called an emotional feedback loop. The person using this has to be genuinely desperate and willing to sacrifice themselves for others, she said. The stronger those emotions, the more effective the weapon becomes. It was the most human weapon ever conceived, unreliable, unpredictable, and powered by the very emotions that the Vorthak considered tactical weaknesses. As the war continued, both sides were becoming something they had never been before. The humans were learning to fight with a combination of advanced alien technology and desperate creativity that made them unpredictable even to themselves. And Thulnox was learning what it meant to fight for something more than just victory. The ultimate test was coming soon. After 4 months of warfare unlike anything in galactic history, War Prime Thulnox made an announcement that surprised both his own forces and the human resistance. He transmitted his message to every surviving human military frequency simultaneously. Humans of Earth, I have studied your species and found you worthy of a final honor. Send me your greatest warrior for single combat. If your champion can defeat me, I will depart your world. If I am victorious, your species will surrender completely. The message caused immediate debate among the scattered human leadership. Some saw it as their only chance to end the war with some survivors. Others suspected it was just another alien. Trick Admiral Lee Jinwoo gathered the remaining military commanders in a secure bunker deep beneath what had once been Geneva. The room was lit by battery-powered lights and heated by a small fire built from furniture salvaged from the destroyed city above. We need to think about this carefully, Lee said. Thulnox has been studying us for months. He knows our tactics, our technology, our capabilities. Whoever fights him will be walking into a battle they can't win. General Park Won-sik disagreed. Maybe that's exactly why we should do it. He expects us to send our most skilled fighter, someone who will try to defeat him using conventional tactics. What are you suggesting? Asked Dr. Song Airy. Send someone he won't expect. Someone who represents what makes us human rather than what makes us good soldiers. The debate continued for hours, but eventually a decision was made. Not by the leadership, but by someone who simply volunteered. Sergeant Major Bae Sunmi had been fighting since the first day of the invasion. She had lost her home in Seoul, her family in Busan, and most of her unit in the months of desperate resistance that followed. At 42 years old, she was older than most of the fighters still alive, and her body carried the scars of battles that should have been impossible to survive. I'll fight him, she announced when the commanders were still arguing about who to choose. Sunmi, you're not even our best fighter, Lee said gently. We have younger soldiers, people with better reflexes, more advanced training. That's exactly why it should be me, she replied. I'm not fighting him to win. I'm fighting him to show him what we are. She looked around the room at the tired faces of humanity's remaining leaders. Every one of you has lost people you cared about. Every one of you has kept fighting anyway, not because you thought you could win, but because giving up would dishonor the people we've lost. That's not a military strategy, Park pointed out. No, Sunmi agreed. It's something more important. The duel was set for the ruins of Busan, the city where so much of the human resistance had taken place. Thulnox chose the location himself, perhaps as a mark of respect for the fighters who had given him his most challenging battles. When Sunmi arrived at the designated area, she found the War Prime waiting in what had once been the city's central plaza. His biomechanical armor gleamed in the afternoon sunlight, and his weapon hummed with enough power to level buildings. Sunmi carried the emotional amplifier that engineer Lim Soo-young had built, along with a standard military sidearm and a combat knife. She looked pitifully small compared to her opponent, like a child challenging a giant. You are not what I expected, Thulnox said, his voice echoing across the empty plaza. I anticipated facing your finest warrior. You are, Sunmi replied. Simply, you have no chance of defeating me in combat. Your weapons cannot penetrate my armor. Your speed cannot match my reflexes. This is not battle. It is execution. Sunmi nodded. You're right. I can't beat you. This seemed to confuse the War Prime. In all his previous conquests, the enemy champions had boasted of their strength, declared their determination to triumph, promised to defend their people. They had never simply agreed that they were going to lose. Then why do you stand against me? Because someone has to. The battle began, and it was exactly as one-sided as Thulnox had predicted. Sunmi's conventional weapons had no effect on his armor. Her desperate attacks were easily countered by his superior speed and strength. Within minutes, she was bleeding from multiple wounds and could barely stand. But something strange was happening. With each exchange, Thulnox found himself becoming more uncomfortable rather than more confident. This human wasn't fighting to win. She was fighting to make a point. Surrender, he commanded, after knocking her down for the 6th time. You have shown courage. That is enough. Sunmi struggled back to her feet, blood running down her face from a cut on her forehead. No. You gain nothing by continuing this futile struggle. I gain everything. She activated Soo-young's emotional amplifier, and suddenly the air around her began to shimmer with energy. The device was powered by her desperation, her grief, her absolute refusal to give up even when giving up was the only logical choice. I lost my daughter and soul, she said, advancing toward Thulnox despite her injuries. She was 7 years old. She wanted to be a teacher. The amplifier flared brighter, and for the first time the War Prime's armor registered an energy signature it couldn't completely deflect. I lost my husband in the subway tunnels. He died trying to get civilians to safety. He could have run, but he stayed. Another pulse of energy, stronger this time. Thulnox actually had to step backward as the emotional resonance interfered with his suit's systems. I lost my parents, my brother, my friends, everyone I ever cared about. But I didn't lose what they taught me. The amplifier was overloading now, creating energy patterns that made the aliens' advanced technology stutter and spark. But Sunmi was dying from the feedback. The device was burning her out from the inside. They taught me that some things are worth dying for, that protecting others is more important than protecting yourself, that love is stronger than fear. She collapsed to her knees, but the energy field around her continued to grow. Thulnox found his weapon systems failing, his armor's power grid fluctuating wildly. They taught me that being human isn't about being strong or smart or perfect. It's about caring so much about something that you'll sacrifice everything for it. The War Prime stood over her fallen form, but for the first time in centuries he felt something other than satisfaction at victory. The human was dying, but she had won something more important than the battle. She had made him understand what he had been destroying. Why? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Why do you fight for others who cannot help you? Why do you sacrifice yourself for those who are already gone? Sunmi looked up at him with eyes that were failing but still determined. Because that's what makes us human. The emotional amplifier finally burned out completely, and Sergeant Major Bae Sunmi died in the ruins of the city she had helped defend. But her death had accomplished something no weapon could have achieved. It had shown Thulnox the hollow emptiness of his own existence. For 847 worlds, he had conquered and destroyed, always moving on to the next target, without ever asking why. He had been the perfect Vorthak warrior, efficient and emotionless and utterly without purpose beyond victory. But these humans had shown him something different. They fought not because they were strong, but because they cared. They sacrificed themselves not for glory or conquest, but for love. Standing in the ruins of Busan, looking down at the body of a warrior who had defeated him without landing a single blow, Thulnox the Unbreakable finally understood what he had become, and he realized he could never go back to what he had been. The silence after the duel lasted for 3 days. Thulnox remained motionless in the ruins of Busan, standing guard over Sergeant Major Bae Sunmi's body, while the scattered human resistance waited to learn their fate. No one knew what was happening in the mind of the Vorthak warrior, but everyone understood that everything had changed. Admiral Lee Jinwoo received the first communication on the 4th day. The message came through every available channel simultaneously, broadcast across the entire planet in dozens of languages. Humans of Earth. I am War Prime Thulnox. Your champion has defeated me. The words caused confusion in bunkers and hideouts. Around the world, everyone had seen the battle recordings. Sunmi had died while Thulnox had barely been scratched. She did not destroy my physical form, the message continued, as if the War Prime could hear their thoughts. But she accomplished something far more significant. She showed me the emptiness of conquest without purpose. Lee gathered his surviving commanders around their communication equipment, listening to words that seemed impossible coming from the alien who had devastated their world. I have spent millennia as the ultimate expression of Vorthak military power. I have conquered 847 worlds, destroyed countless civilizations, eliminated entire species with perfect efficiency. I believed this was the highest form of existence possible. In her hidden laboratory, Dr. Song Eri was recording every word while monitoring energy readings from the War Prime's location. The alien's biomechanical armor was generating power signatures unlike anything they had detected before. Your species has shown me concepts I had forgotten could exist. You fight not for dominance, but for protection of those you love. You sacrifice not for glory, but for ideals that exist beyond your individual survival. You have taught me what I lost when I became the perfect warrior. Commander Nam Jae-hyun was listening from his position in the ruins of Seoul, where he and his team had been preparing for what they assumed would be their final battle. Like everyone else, he was struggling to understand what the War Prime's words meant for humanity's future. I cannot return to the Vorthak Empire as I was. They would see the changes in me as contamination, weakness, failure. They would strip me of rank and purpose, remake me into the weapon I was before encountering your species. The transmission paused, and monitoring stations around the world detected massive energy fluctuations from Thulnox's position. But I also cannot remain here. My presence would mark your world for eventual conquest by other Vorthak forces. Your species has earned the right to develop without interference, but that right must be protected. Dr. Kang Ji-hye was analyzing the psychological implications of the War Prime's words, and what she discovered filled her with both hope and sadness. He's protecting us, she told her research team, but it's going to cost him everything he's ever known. The energy readings were becoming more intense, and several human monitoring stations detected what appeared to be advanced Vorthak technology being activated on a massive scale. I am erasing all records of your solar system from Vorthak navigation databases, Thulnox announced. The coordinates that led my people to your world will be removed from every star chart, every exploration log, every piece of Imperial documentation. This was beyond anything the humans had dared hope for. Complete removal from alien records would mean that Earth might remain hidden for centuries, possibly forever. The hyperspace routes that connect your region of space to the greater galaxy will be collapsed, making accidental discovery nearly impossible. I am using technology that will take your species millennia to develop, committing resources that represent the accumulated wealth of conquered worlds. General Park Wansik was the first to understand the full implications. He's not just protecting us, he's cutting us off completely. We'll be safe, but we'll also be alone. The final part of Thalnox's message confirmed this understanding. Your species will develop in isolation until you are ready to face the galaxy on equal terms. When that time comes, you will find the universe a dangerous place, but you will also bring something to it that has been missing for too long. Captain Ominsak was monitoring alien communications and detected something that made him call urgently to his team. There's movement from the Vorthak fleet. They're trying to establish contact with the War Prime, but Thulnox was already beyond their reach. To my former brothers in conquest, do not search for me. Do not attempt to understand what has occurred here. Record this system as a failure, a dead end unworthy of the Empire's attention. I will ensure that this notation remains accurate for as long as necessary. Engineer Lim Suyong was tracking the energy signatures and realized that something unprecedented was happening. He's not just hiding our location, he's positioning himself as a permanent guardian. The War Prime's final transmission came as his energy readings shifted into patterns that human science couldn't begin to understand. I go now to the deep void, between stars, where I will maintain watch over approaches to your system. Your world will remain hidden, but it will not remain undefended. Any force that threatens your species will find me waiting. Private Choi Sunwoo, now a veteran leader of the resistance, was among those watching as a new star appeared in the night sky. It wasn't really a star, but the energy signature of Vorthak technology, operating at levels that bent space and time. I have learned from your species that true strength comes not from the ability to destroy, but from the willingness to protect. I will spend eternity applying this lesson, ensuring that humanity has the time it needs to grow into what it can become. The star pulsed once and then began moving away from Earth's solar system, heading toward the empty spaces between galaxies where nothing existed but darkness and silence. Do not mourn for me, came the final message, already fading as the War Prime moved beyond normal communication range. You have given me something worth existing for. That is a gift beyond price. And then Thulnox the Unbreakable vanished into the cosmic void, taking with him all records of humanity's location and leaving behind a species that would rebuild in safety. Years later, when children asked about the scars that still marked their world's great cities, they would be told about the war that changed everything. They would learn about ordinary people who did extraordinary things, about the power of refusing to surrender, even when victory was impossible. But most importantly, they would learn about the day when humanity's greatest enemy became their eternal guardian, choosing exile and loneliness over returning to a life without meaning. Admiral Lee, now an old man helping to rebuild a world that had been nearly destroyed, often looked up at the night sky and wondered what was happening in the spaces between stars. Somewhere out there, a warrior who had conquered 847 worlds was standing watch, making sure that the species who had taught him about love and sacrifice could grow into their full potential. It was a kind of victory that no military strategist could have planned for, and a kind of sacrifice that proved the War Prime had learned humanity's lessons well. Earth was safe, hidden, and protected. And in the deep void where light never reached, Thulnox the Unbreakable had finally found a purpose worthy of his strength.